What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my comprehensive breakdown, builds guide and showcase of CYL7 units featuring Brave Soren, Male Robin, Female Corrin and Gullveig. By the end of this video, you're going to be having a much better idea of how these units function and which units you need to summon, spark or even use your free summon on. So let us begin with Brave Gullveig, who's going to be manipulating time as a Blue Mage Flier. So she has got the Cycle's Turn as her preferred weapon. This has got the flat Canto 1 built in, which is really good because she cannot run a Fortress skill as Gold Unwinding is her preferred skill. And then this weapon also gives her -1 special cooldown, which makes Luna into a 2 cooldown special. And if she initiates combat or if any kind of bonus is active on her, then she can get +5 to all of her stats and she can get even more attack and speed in combat depending on the number of turns multiplied by 2. And this can go all the way up to max 10, so she can essentially get 15 attack and speed from this weapon on turn 5, which is going to be making her hit really hard. And then speaking of hitting hard, she also deals true damage based on 20% of her speed, and this also includes the AoE specials. And then finally she has got full null follow-up built in her weapon, which allows her to bypass any kind of follow-up negation effects and also stops the auto follow-up of the enemies. So this can make her into a really strong offensive nuke with her 45 base attack and 47 speed, which is just absolutely insane. And the offenses that she gets out of this weapon is extremely good along with the true damage. So she's going to be one of the best offensive nukes in the game. And she also has her sloppy skill in Gold Unwinding, which is going to be making her even more unique. So this inflicts -5 speed and resistance debuff on the foe in the combat, and at the start of combat, if her HP is at or above half, and if she initiates combat, then she's able to get 60% damage reduction on foe's first attack. So having 60% damage reduction means that almost always she's going to be surviving unless the opponent has got some kind of damage reduction piercing skill like Special Spiral 4, or they just have something like Deadeye or Lethality. But a lot of the tanks in the game are not going to be having that, so almost always she's going to be coming out alive and then triggering Galeforce with this weapon. So if unit initiates combat, she can get another action after the combat, and she's going to be inflicting gravity on herself and the pair up cohort through her next action. And even though she inflicts gravity status on herself, she can still use the charge status from Alir's or Legendary Hinoka to simply travel more spaces, because the charge status essentially allows you to warp, and she's going to be able to warp with Legendary Hinoka or Alir's support. So Legendary Hinoka is easily one of the best teammates with Gullveig because not only she provides her with the special charge status, which allows Gullveig to trigger her specials easily, but also the charge status, which pretty much gets rid of one of the weaknesses of Gold Unwinding with the gravity effect. So she is an incredible teammate, and we all got Male Alir for free, so that is something you can still try out for free by pairing her up with Male Alir. Her Galeforce from Gold Unwinding is something that you can only trigger every other turn. You cannot really trigger Galeforce twice in a single turn, so you will have to wait for the cooldown, which the game does show on her. So that is a pretty good visual indicator. And then she also has attack speed Oath 4 as part of her kit, which allows her to get the Order status and also +6 attack and speed buff. And this is going to be helping her teleport and also hit and run because she can just trigger her Galeforce and then warp away, and her Canto is going to be really helpful. The flat Canto does work with the teleportation as well. So overall her base kit does function really well for a hit and run unit. And speaking of hit and running, she comes with one of the best skills in the game in Flared Sparrow, which is pretty much the best fodder out of this entire CYL7 Banner because it is so good and it's something that we have never really seen before. So if unit initiates combat, they can deal 7 damage to foe at start of the combat, and this negates any kind of damage reduction effects, and this cannot really put the enemy's HP below 1, so this cannot really kill the enemy. This is like a pre-combat poison strike in a way. So having the 7 flat damage is extremely good, and then she can get +7 attack and speed in the combat, and after the combat it applies the Divine Vein Flame terrain effect on 5 spaces in a line centered on foe's space for 1 turn. So this can be horizontally, this can be vertically, and this can even be applied diagonally if you attack diagonally. So Divine Vein Flame is a new terrain effect which acts as a difficult terrain for the ranged opponents to pass. It's not like an impassable terrain, they can still pass, but it is going to be costing them the movement. And this is also applied to the flying units, which are usually not affected by any kind of terrain. They are still going to be slowed by this if they are a ranged unit. and actually the unhindered movement status of Kadean Lind and the Kadean units can actually bypass it. I know in the description it kind of says that it doesn't, but after testing this out, Kadean Lind and the other Kadean units can easily bypass the flame terrain without really any kind of movement cost. So Kadean Lind is going to be even more useful for bypassing these terrains, and then this can deal 7 damage to foe at start of enemy phase if they're standing on the flame tile. Now this does not really affect Medius or any kind of unit with On Guard, because On Guard just stops any kind of external damage, so On Guard obviously ignores that, but it doesn't really ignore the additional 7 damage that you can do at start of the combat if they're on the flame terrain. So the 7 damage is going to be actually really helpful for killing the opponents, and it acts as another form of chip damage. And if you've got an enemy on the flame terrain, then you can actually do 14 damage to them before your first hit, 7 damage from Flared Sparrow and the 7 damage from the flame terrain, which is going to be really amazing to kill some of the bulkier opponents. The flame damage does ignore the damage reduction effects, and again it can only kill the opponents, and all it can do is leave them at 1 HP at the most. So this is going to be really good for any kind of hit and run unit, and especially for Brave Gullveig, who has got that Galeforce inner slot B skill. And keep in mind that the 7 damage that you do at start of combat, it can not really put the opponent in something like vantage range, because it's not like at start of turn damage, it's actually in the combat itself. So this is going to be a really solid skill for her, and easily the best skill that she has got. And this, with her gold unwinding, allows her to have multiple tiles with the flame terrain, which is really good for the chip damage. Now because this is a Divine Vein effect, it does not really stack up, so you cannot really have like 2 flames on top of each other. That's not how it works. This does replace any kind of existing Divine Vein effect as well, so if you're facing Brave Female Corrin from this banner and if she's got her stone terrain, then you can replace her stone terrain with your flame terrain by attacking her, and Divine Vein effects, which are applied simultaneously, do cancel each other out. So that's something you have to keep in mind, because Divine Vein and the terrains are something that is extremely new to FEH, and it is going to be changing FEH and how it works, and we're probably going to be getting a lot more skills in the future with this. So Flared Sparrow, I wish was a preferred skill of Gullveig, because it's so good. It's like the best skill for so many of the units, and certainly for Gullveig herself, who can do amazing hit and run in Aether Raids offense, and she can actually be a really solid Galeforce unit there, because that's where Brave Gullveig really shines, as she has got the Galeforce with her gold unwinding. She has got amazing offensive capabilities to kill a lot of far safe tanks, and if the far safe tank doesn't die, then she's going to be getting another action, and most of the time she's going to be living most of the far safe tanks, and she can initiate a gain on them and pretty much kill them and then run away with her Canto. Of course you have to watch out for Canto control, which is going to be stopping her Canto 1, and that is going to be a lot more common in the light season, as Medius is a pretty common unit. And then you can just have the flame terrain acting as a wall between Gullveig and the range units, and slowing down the range units from chasing her. So overall, Brave Gullveig is an incredibly powerful Mage Flier who can hit really hard with her base 45 attack, and also be really fast with that base 47 speed. And having Galeforce inner slot B does make her a pretty unique unit. We haven't really had too many units that can have Galeforce and also trigger their special at the same time, so that does allow her to hit really hard while still having the hit and run potential and the Galeforcing potential for Aether Raids. And because of the 60% damage reduction in her gold unwinding, she's able to set up many of the Galeforce allies and Wings of Mercy allies reliably in Aether Raids offense. And if not, then you can just hit and run against many of the low threat range teams, which are usually going to be Catria balls, as they do have units with not a lot of extending range. So with a good team, you can pretty much try and hit and run against them by taking out their far safe tank, and then by inflicting the flame terrain, and then using the Galeforce of Gullveig to pretty much retreat along with her Canto. So that's where she can really shine as a hit and run unit, and in general she's going to be functioning as a really solid nuke. Unfortunately, because of being a Mage Flier, she doesn't really have access to damage reduction piercing, which can be a bit annoying at times, and also the lack of tempo effect or the null guard effect is also something that can stop her from nuking, because she does depend on her special many times to nuke the opponent, and that's where she is different from a lot of the other Galeforce units who can hardly use a special. So if she had those things, that would have been a lot better. She does pretty good against speed-based damage reduction because she herself is so fast, and she also has the blue color, which is going to be pretty advantageous against a lot of the Godswords. Like I said before, Flared Sparrow is pretty much the best fodder out of this banner, and it is going to be available for any kind of Cavalier, or Flyer. Unfortunately, infantry and armor units cannot have access to this, so this is going to be the best slot A skill for a lot of hit and run units like Legendary Hinoka, Cyan Leaf, and also Ninja Corrin. Honestly, I would spend the entire video just going over the best users of this because this is such a good skill that a lot of units that are player phase want this. And even melee units can make use of this, like Tita Myra, who is an amazing nuke, and also Legendary Nana. And we also have Nerthus, who has pretty much the same concept as Brave Gullveig with her Galeforce. So there's hardly any kind of player phase, Cavalier or Flyer that doesn't want to have Flared Sparrow because having the extra damage in the combat is absolutely amazing, and inflicting the flame terrain for extra damage and slowing down the range opponents is always going to be helpful. If you're going to be building up Brave Gullveig, then giving her attack speed Cat Sacred Seal or Blade Session Sacred Seal is going to be doing you fine. Her base kit is already so good, and Flared Sparrow is the best slot A skill for her, and Gold Unwinding is what makes her so unique. Now, like I showcased before, AoE Gullveig is definitely legit, and you can definitely try and run her in Aether Raids offense. And I think that even with an AoE build, you can run Flared Sparrow because the flame terrain is absolutely amazing. So you can run Life and Death and have an AoE special like Blazing Wind, and simply use her with Duo Chrom or pre-charge this with Asker, Garrick, and the other special charging units, and you can actually kill a lot of the enemies with this AoE special because the true damage that she gets based on her speed actually gets added to the AoE specials as well. So she's going to be hitting pretty hard with the AoE special as well, and this is something I don't really see being used that much. So I think this is going to be an alternate option that you can run on Gullveig, and it's really fun. I've been using her quite a lot in Aether Raids offense with the AoE special, and she absolutely kills things while also doing the AoE damage and then setting up the flame terrain for the allies to just pick off the enemy's units. So it can definitely be a pretty nice option. And then you can also try and change her slotsy skill to Defense Res Smoke 3 to get that Pathfinder. And Pathfinder is actually pretty helpful on her because a lot of times she can just one-shot the opponents and just retreat with her Kanto and her Galeforce. So in that case, you can just allow any other ally to go in and maybe set up Galeforce or just set up your Wings of Mercy units. So having Pathfinder, in my opinion, can be helpful. So that is going to be a pretty good slotsy skill that you can also run on Brave Gullveig for Aether Raids offense. And Sea Feud is also amazing slotsy skill because Fallen Maria is everywhere, and if you're trying to delete someone's far safe tank, then many times Fallen Maria can actually be an obstruction. So that's why having Colorless Feud and ignoring Fallen Maria can actually be a really helpful thing for Brave Gullveig in Aether Raids offense. So that is also going to be an option. And I think that changing her special from Luna to Ruptured Sky is a lot better because a lot of the far safe tanks are either going to be Dragon units or Beast units. So having the extra damage against them with Ruptured Sky is actually really good. And Ruptured Sky is a 1 cooldown special for her. So you can actually pre-charge that with Asker and just trigger Ruptured Sky twice in a single round of combat. So that is going to be adding to the offensive prowess of Brave Gullveig. So you can definitely consider that if you're going to be investing heavily into her. Having any kind of flyer in arena does make your arena journey a lot smoother because a lot of the arena maps are flyer favored. So having such a strong flyer in Brave Gullveig, who not only has Kanto 1 but also Galeforce Inner Slot B skill, is going to be making your arena run much easier. Even though she doesn't really score as much as many of the other scoring options, if you do have her at plus and merge, then she could be used with other high scoring units and function as a really good support with Guidance 4 and also a solid nuke with that Galeforce. And having the flame terrain slowing down the opponents is going to be making it a bit easier many times on many of the maps where you could just get rushed down. So even if not the highest scoring, she's still amazing in arena. Brave Female Corrin chooses her path as a colorless armor dragon, and she's got Valor Stone as her preferred weapon. This gives her -1 special cooldown, making Armored Flow into a 2 cooldown special, and after she has used her action, she can apply the Divine Vein Stone Terrain effect on her space and the 2 spaces within herself. And this is a new terrain effect that we have seen, just like the flame terrain of Brave Gullveig's Flared Sparrow. So this Divine Vein Stone Terrain is going to be giving the effect only to your unit and the allies. It is not going to be giving any kind of effect to the enemy. So this can give +6 defense and resistance in the combat, and it also provides you the true flat damage reduction by 10 on foe specials. Now the flat damage reduction means that it is not pierceable by Deadeye, Lethality, Special Spiral 4, or any of those specials. So it is going to be a flat damage reduction, which is going to be really helpful whenever she faces pre-charged specials. And then finally, it also provides her with 50% damage reduction from the AoE specials, which is really helpful because she doesn't exactly have the highest raw resistance. So having this damage reduction against AoE special does help her against Duo Thor, Spring Sonya, and many of the AoE special units. And keep in mind that this is a Divine Vein effect, so it is not a defensive terrain, and Divine Vein effects do not stack up, so you cannot have two stone terrains just stack up. And it can also replace any kind of existing Divine Vein effect, so you can actually use your own Corrin to replace the Divine Vein stone effect of the enemy, so that is also something that is possible. And you can also replace the Divine Vein flame effect from Flared Sparrow by using your Brave Female Corrin simply by ending her action. Now, ending the action is really important because even if you just end the turn, it is not going to be applying the terrain. She needs to end her action. And if her action gets ended by something like Safety Fence or Aether, then she's not able to apply the Divine Vein stone terrain. So that is something you have to keep in mind. And every time her action gets ended, she's able to apply the Divine Vein stone terrain, which means that if she gets danced or if she has multiple actions, then she can Divine Vein more than just 2 spaces within her. So she's able to apply the stone terrain on multiple tiles if she can move multiple times, which is something that is absolutely amazing. And then with this weapon at start of combat, if her HP is at or above 25%, then she can inflict -5 debuff on all stats of the opponent, and also gets the full null follow-up effect, which also is amazing for a fast dragon like her because she is going to be able to stop the auto follow-up attacks of the enemies, and she's already so fast that she's going to be naturally able to deny follow-up attacks of many enemies. And then finally she can get 30% damage reduction on each hit. And this 30% damage reduction is the regular damage reduction, so it is pierceable by Deadeye, lethality, and stuff like that. But what is not pierceable is definitely the damage reduction that she gets from Armored Flow. So this can boost up her damage by 40% of her resistance, and her resistance is higher than her defense, which does work out. And if she's facing any kind of ranged opponent, and if her special or the foe special is ready or triggers before or during the combat, then she can get 40% damage reduction from foe's next attack. This is not going to be getting pierced by Deadeye, Lethality, Special Spiral 4, or any of those specials, which is really good for her because the other damage reduction that she has got in her kit is pierceable. Now this, along with the Divine Vein stone effect, giving her the 10 flat damage reduction against enemy specials, is really good because she can be really tanky even against enemy specials, which can be really deadly many times. So this allows her to be extremely tanky while being really fast with that base 46 speed, and she does have 205 BST, which means that she is a trainee Gen 8 armor unit. And trainee BST pretty much means that you have more BST than the other units in your generation. So she's definitely not going to be getting one-upped by any kind of other unit in this generation at the very least. And this also allows her to score really high in Arena. She also has her slotted skill Realms United, which does have distant counter built in. So this allows her to retaliate back to ranged units without the use of distant counter Dragon Sacred Seal, which is really good. And if foe initiates combat or if foe's HP is at or above 75%, then she can inflict -7 debuff on all stats of the opponent, which does stack up with the debuffs that she can do with her weapon. So she can debuff the opponent by quite a lot. And then finally she's able to get true flat damage reduction from foe's first attack by 7. So we have seen the flat damage reductions before in something like Shield Pulse on Anankos and also on Hardy Fighters. So this is again the similar flat true damage reduction, which doesn't get pierced by Deadeye Lethality. So the first attack of the enemy is going to be getting 7 damage cut off, which is going to be making her really tanky. And keep in mind, the first attack here does mean the first and the second strike of a Brave weapon. So it also allows her to tank a lot of the Brattle Catcher teams and Winter Cordelia teams really well, and also the Brave weapon users. So having this kind of flat damage reduction is going to be making her even more tanky with all kinds of damage reduction that she already has in her base kit, and also with Armored Flow. And she's also really fast, so being a fast save armor is always useful because you're not going to be getting doubled that much, and you also are not going to be getting fire swept that much by the conditional fire sweep effects that depend on winning the speed check. And being a fast armor unit with null follow-up does mean that she's not going to be getting doubled as much, and she already has things that can help her against the Brave effect. So it does make her as a pretty tanky unit who's going to be pretty annoying to take out. And then she has got Counter Roar 4 as a new skill in her kit. So in the combat, it does inflict -4 speed and attack debuff on the foe, and it does give you 30% damage reduction from foe's first attack. And again, the first attack is going to be counting the Brave hits, so it is pretty helpful against the Brave attacks. and then unit's next attack deals damage based on 30% of foe's attack damage prior to any kind of damage reduction, and this resets at the end of the combat and only the highest value is applied. So this is kind of like Brash Assault 4 with its damage reflection, because you pretty much reflect any kind of damage that you're going to be reducing with Counter Roar 4, but keep in mind you're only going to be reflecting the damage from this skill itself. The other damage reduction that you get is not going to be applied on the damage reflection, just like with Brash Assault 4. And even if you get this damage reduction pierce from Counter Roar, you're still going to be able to reflect the damage back, which is going to be really helpful, especially for Corrin, who already has flat damage reduction against these specials. And finally, after combat, you're able to heal up 7 HP, which is really good for the self-sustain. So Corrin has had Negating Fang in her ults, and this is not exactly Negating Fang, but still it provides some kind of damage reflection, which can be really good for taking out the enemies that do a lot of damage. And the damage reduction does stack up with her Valor Stone, giving her 51% damage reduction on foe's first attack, which is extremely good for survival. And then she also has the attack speed far save skill, which allows her to function as an amazing far save unit while also getting extra speed. And previously only Valentine Takumi had this skill, so this being available in the normal pool is really good. And Brave Female Corrin is all about speed, so stacking up any kind of speed is going to be helping her, especially in the speed creep metagame where we have so many of the fast units. Overall, Brave Female Corrin is easily one of the best far save tanks, if not the best far save tank as of making this video, because she is amazingly fast, she has got a lot of damage reduction, and she has got the trainee BST, which means that she is not really all that frail compared to a lot of the other fast armors that usually end up losing a lot of bulk. So because of having more BST, she's able to have actual bulk, which is also helpful. And she is going to be really fast, which is going to be making it pretty hard for a lot of these slower tanks to just kill her. And having Divine Vein Stone terrain is going to be making her even more bulky, and it also provides as a supportive effect to the other allies because they're also able to benefit out of the defensive effects of the stone terrain. And another thing about her is that she is just really good in any kind of game mode, be it the in-game content, chain challenges, Aether Raids offense, Aether Raids defense, and even in Summoner Duels. So she has a pretty broad appeal as a unit because far save tanks are always going to be helpful, and she is one of the best at it when it comes to far saving, with that distant counter, with that damage reduction, and with that speed. So she's just a really solid unit, but still not without her weaknesses because she's an armor dragon, so she's going to be weak to that effective damage, but still she's got so much damage reduction that she can still live through a lot of effective damage, and she doesn't really have any kind of guard skill in her kit, so that could also be annoying because having guard is always useful as a tank. And she also doesn't have the scowl effect like Brattle Tiki, so that could be annoying, but then again she already has the flat damage reduction against the specials with her stone terrain, and also has the flat damage reduction with her slotty skill, so that can help her whenever the enemy triggers a special. And because we're going to be getting so many fast units, a lot of times units with enough speed can try and double her, but most of the time she's going to be fast enough if you do invest in her speed, and that's why I think that the plus speed IV is the best IV for her, because being fast is really important as a fast armored dragon, especially when we have so many other fast units. Counter Roar is a new skill that she brings, and this is inheritable to any kind of beast or dragon unit. And there are many units which would like to have this slot B skill, like Asker for example, because he already has the flat damage reduction, so having the regular damage reduction from slot B is really good. And because of the tempo effect by being an infantry beast, he can retaliate back with bonfires that do a lot of damage, and he can just stack up the healing with a finish skill. So Counter Roar 4 in my opinion is the best slot B skill for him at like max investment. And then we have Negating Fang of Halloween Female Corrin, and also Ledgering Corrin. Now Ledgering Corrin is due for a weapon refine and remix, so I'd probably wait before giving her this skill. So having two forms of damage reflection in Negating Fang and Counter Roar is really good. So this is going to be an amazing skill, and she already comes with Dragon Strat 4, which in my opinion kind of gets dunked on by Counter Roar 4 for the most part in many cases. And then we also have Ledgering Mer, who does have the Warp Bubble, and she can make use of the Scowl effect and also have Counter Roar 4 for getting some damage reduction and also some damage reflection, which is going to be really helpful in many of the game modes. You can also run the skill on Freyr, who is going to be used in Aether Raids defense, and especially if you try and make Freyr as a near save unit by using Brave Soren, then this is going to be an amazing skill because Counter Roar 4 is going to be making him even more annoying defensively by getting that damage reduction, and it also allows him to reflect any kind of damage. Ascended Young Tiki is also another unit who can benefit from this skill because she does take advantage of the speed debuff of this skill compared to slower units like Asker or Freyr, so having this skill is going to be pretty amazing for her as long as you can provide her with some kind of external null follow-up. And then finally, this is going to be good on any kind of dragon with Arcane Grima because they get the healing out of that weapon and also Counter Roar 4, so it is pretty amazing for the self-sustain. And someone like the normal Corrin who doesn't really have the highest attack does benefit from the damage reflection as it is going to be giving them much better damage output. If you're going to be building up Brave Female Corrin, then you can simply give her Darting Breath or any kind of speed form skill because stacking up speed is going to be really important for her, and like I said before, speed is the best IV for her even if she doesn't have a super boon in that. So you can just give her Swap or Pivot and she can just function fine with her base kit. It is already pretty good, but if you're trying to change your slot-based skill, then Special Fighter 4 is something that you can run by trading off some kind of firepower from Counter Roar and some damage reduction by trying to get the special charges and also the guard effect. You get the healing still from Special Fighter 4, so it could be an option. So like many of the fast dragons, she's able to make use of Special Fighter 4 really well as well, and also retaliate back with Armored Flow on her counter attack, so she doesn't really need to run a Breath Sacred Seal. And finally, if you do want to have more survivability instead of having the firepower, then Hardy Fighter Aegis is going to be the combo to go for because Hardy Fighter Aegis provides you with 75% damage reduction and also provides you with a flat damage reduction, which is really good with all of the other flat damage reductions that she gets from her slotty skill and the Divine Vein Stone effect. So Hardy Fighter is going to be the choice for many people if they are trying to use her in Summoner Duels, and in Summoner Duels, the survivability matters a lot more than killing the opponent because if you lose your far safe tank, then you're going to be susceptible to a lot of the ranged threats. So their Hardy Fighter is going to be useful even though the half null follow-up of it is a bit redundant. Since Brave Female Corrin is a 205 BST unit, if she runs Distant Counter Dragon Sacred Seal, which is a 300 SP Sacred Seal, then she's able to score like she is a 215 BST unit, which is just absolutely insane, and this makes her the highest scoring arena unit as of making this video. We're probably going to be getting the bump in the duo skills where duo units are able to score as much, but right now, even though it is redundant to run Distant Counter, it is still the highest scoring Sacred Seal option for her. So if you're aiming to have the max score, then it is something you would unfortunately have to run even though it does absolutely nothing with her Realms United. If you don't really care too much about arena scoring, then you could definitely run some other Sacred Seal like Attack Speed Form for example, but until we get another 300 SP Sacred Seal, Distant Counter Dragon, even though it does nothing, is going to be the highest scoring option for her. Brave Male Robin tips these scales as a sword infantry unit this time, and he has got Deliverer's Brand as his preferred weapon. This gives him +3 speed, and that is definitely kind of unnatural for a lot of the modern units as they all have minus and special cooldown, but it does make sense with his base kit. And then at start of combat, if his HP is at or above 25%, he can get +5 to all of his stats and also get 40% damage reduction on foe's first attack. He also gets the full tempo effect, which pretty much allows him to bypass any kind of guard skills of the opponent and any kind of special charging skills that they may have. So if he was attacking into any kind of unit with Special Fighter, they wouldn't be able to retaliate back with his special. Similarly, he doesn't care about the guard skill of the enemy, so he's going to be able to trigger his specials a lot easily. And if his max special cooldown count is at or above 3, then he's able to bypass and pierce through the damage reduction skills of the enemies that are non-special based when he triggers his specials. So that is going to be extremely powerful and does make him a really good damage reduction slayer and Godsword slayer. We have seen a lot of damage reduction this year, and him being able to pierce through the damage reduction with his specials is really good, and it does make him a solid melee nuke. And finally, at start of combat, if his HP is at or above 25%, and if he has got any kind of special that scales off of the defense of his, like Bonfire or Ignis, then he can get adaptive damage and he can basically attack the lower of opponent's defense or resistance. So this allows him to do massive damage to many of the defense tanks that may have a lot of defense but really low resistance. So having the adaptive damage with Bonfire and Ignis is really on brand with Robin, and it is going to be making him as even better melee nuke by piercing through the damage reduction, by having the tempo effect, not caring about the guard skills of the enemies, and then by hitting really hard with his base 46 attack. And also, he's really fast with that base 45 speed, which does have a super boon. The reason why Brave Male Robin is so good as he is because of his Slotsy skill, Tip the Scales. So this is his exclusive skill, and at start of turn, if he's within 2 spaces of an ally, he can grant the Rally Spectrum status to himself and the allies within 2 spaces. And he can warp to a space adjacent to an ally with Rally Spectrum, and that can be up to 5 spaces. So he can have a 5-space warp with the Rally Spectrum status on him, which is extremely good. And Rally Spectrum status is something that he can easily give out to his allies, so this makes his mobility extremely good as a sword infantry unit. He's gonna be jumping all over the map with his Rally Spectrum allies, and that is really good. And if he's within 2 spaces of an ally, then he can get +3 to all of his stats in the combat, and that is really easy to do because Robin's whole playstyle is gonna be near his allies, so getting the stats in the combat is gonna be pretty nice. Now as for the Rally Spectrum, it's a new status effect that is visible on the opponent, and it is Embla proof. So Embla can not really ignore the status effect with her Slotsy skill, and it is something that is visible on the unit, and it grants +5 to all of the stats to the unit in the combat. So this is an amazing support, and in many cases it might actually be better than the bonus doubler support from Legendary Eliwood, because many times if you face any kind of dull all enemies or loud skills, then the bonus from Legendary Eliwood is rendered useless. Meanwhile, this is actually the stats in the combat, which is really good, and if you are going to be stacking up a lot of stats, then this could be a pretty amazing support. So Rally Spectrum is a really good support for any kind of Omni tank, and the reason why it's so good is because if the unit has a damaging special, then it can grant special cooldown -X before unit's first attack. So the special cooldown count that is granted is dependent on if your unit has a brave effect on their weapon or active on them, like from Brattle, Catria, or Winter Cordelia, or if they have a slaying weapon that has got minus in special cooldown. So in that case, they are only going to be given minus in special cooldown count before their first attack. Otherwise, they get -2 special cooldown count before their first attack. So this works with the damaging specials, and it unfortunately doesn't work with AoE specials, with defensive specials like Godlike Reflexes or, Galeforce, which is a bit unfortunate. But working with damaging specials is really amazing because this allows units to hit a lot harder with their specials and not get stopped by the guard effect of the enemy units. So if you're facing some kind of opponent with a guard skill or a tempo skill, then this is still going to be happening, and this is going to be giving the special cooldown count to the unit before their first attack. We have seen these kinds of effects on, Brave Tiki and on Diamant, and it actually stacks up with their effects, so it is really good along with them. And the only thing that can stop this is the Scowl skill of the Dragon units. So the Scowl effects are going to be able to equalize the minus in special cooldown that you're able to get, or if you get -2 special cooldown, then it is going to be eating up the 1 special cooldown, and giving units -2 special cooldown before their first attack is extremely good, because if they are a free-to-play unit or an older unit, then they probably do not have minus in special cooldown in their weapon, which means that you're going to be able to, trigger 2 cooldown specials like Vital Astra really easily on them. And if they are running a Bread Sacred Seal, then you can even trigger 4 cooldown specials like Ignis Glacies on them pretty easily. So this is an amazing support, and this is especially going to be really good on many of the Vantage units because you're going to be able to trigger your special in the Vantage range. So stuff like Altina and Kronia, Ares, they're going to be enjoying this kind of effect, especially the latter two who do have Special Spiral 4. So you can actually trigger Lethality with Kronia in her Vantage range with this and Special Spiral 4. And Ares can use Ignis, which is going to be giving you more damage output, and in general this is going to be a pretty amazing support for any kind of Vantage unit or any kind of unit that wants to run Speed Preempt. And this is also going to be really good on Ninja Camilla, who does have the resistance variant of that Vantage, so giving her that special cooldown is going to be really good. Robin also comes with Gambit 4 as a new slot B skill inheritable to any kind of sword, lance, or axe unit. And this does inflict -4 speed and defense debuff on the foe in the combat, and if the foe or foe's attack can trigger unit's special, then they're able to do true damage based on unit's maximum special cooldown count, -2 and then multiplied by 5. So this means that if you're running a 5 cooldown special like Aether, then you're going to be able to get the max 15 true damage per hit, which is quite a lot. And this unfortunately doesn't get added to the AoE specials, and Gambit 4 in general does not work with AoE specials. And then you can also get damage reduction from attacks in the combat and from the AoE specials, depending on unit's maximum special cooldown count value multiplied by 10. And this can go all the way up to 50% if you're running a 5 cooldown special. So this is a really unique skill that incentivizes you to run higher cooldown specials, and usually we have a lot of low cooldown specials for many of the units, so I'm glad that we have something different for the units that want to run high cooldown specials. And Gambit 4 is not going to be working with AoE specials with Galeforce, unfortunately, so that is something you have to keep in mind. It does work with Miracle and any kind of damaging special, so that is really great. And being able to get 50% damage reduction and also 15 true damage per hit is amazing with a 5 cooldown special like Aether, for example. So that is going to be making it a pretty incentivizing skill for many of the units, and I'll go over that later on. And for Robin himself, he's able to get 40% damage reduction and also 10 true damage per hit by running Ignis. And he kind of has to run Ignis if he wants to get the adaptive damage. So it kind of caps off for him, and he also has attack speed finish 4 in his base kit, which is really good with the full tempo effect that he has got in his weapon, so he can easily trigger his specials and heal up the damage and also get even more true damage on top of the damage that he gets from Gambit. So overall, Brave Male Robin is an amazing support unit and a really good melee nuke, and he can even function as an Omni tank because of the damage reduction that he gets from his weapon and Gambit. And ultimately, the reason why he's going to be standing out compared to a lot of sword infantry units is because of Tip the Scales and the Rally Spectrum buff that he can provide to his allies. That is truly an amazing support, and it is so good and so unique, and it's nothing really that we have seen before. And it is going to be amazing support for Omni tanks, for Vantage units, for any kind of unit that wants to trigger their specials and not be affected by the guard skill of the enemy. I kind of wish that it did work with Galeforce because I'm a big Galeforce connoisseur, but even though it doesn't work with Galeforce, he's still going to be an amazing support unit, and he's likely going to be aging pretty well because of this kind of support, even though it's not really as insane as his Legend counterpart and the grand strategy that he provides. And he's a very potent melee nuke as well because of being able to pierce through the damage reduction, which is all the rage right now, and he also gets a lot of true damage. So he's going to be hitting really hard, and he provides some amazing support while having really good mobility with Tip the Scales and its warping. Gambit 4 is going to be an amazing slot-based skill for many units, and I cannot go over every single option because that would be too long, but I'm going to go over some of the best options here. And Hara is easily one of the best free-to-play options because of his Brave weapon, and he can easily run a high cooldown special like Aether. And Ninja Shersha is also an option, and she actually has true damage from her weapon, so she's better than Hara, but Hara is a lot easily available and someone who a lot of people will build up. So Gambit 4 can be a pretty amazing slot B option for him. And it can also be a really good option for our new Summer Male Shez, who does already get the true damage from his weapon, and it's a dual phase Brave weapon. So again, it is kind of similar to Har, where he can get a lot out of it and hit really hard with all of the true damage, and he can also get the damage reduction out of it. And it is going to be comparable to God Bearing 4 for a lot of flyers. And the way I see it is that if you have a minus on special cooldown weapon, and if you just want to trigger lower cooldown specials like Cormac for example, then you pretty much run God Bearing 4. Altina also wants God Bearing 4 because she ultimately wants to run Twin Blades. So God Bearing 4 is going to be a lot better skill for those kinds of units, and for the flyers that can run a higher cooldown special, and if they have special charges in their weapon, or if they have a Brave weapon like Har or Summer Shez, then they can easily run Gambit 4 and get the 50% damage reduction out of it, and also get 15 true damage per hit, which is going to be really good with their Brave weapon. Echidna is one of those units who has definitely shot up in the value after her weapon refine, and she's easily one of the best axe infantry units in the 3-star 4-star pool that you can build up. And Gambit 4 is amazing on her because she has damage reflection in her weapon, and she also has special charges, so she can easily trigger high cooldown specials without running a Bread Sacred Seal. And Hans can also run this, but overall Echidna is better in combat than Hans, and she's going to be missing out on the phantom speed of the tier 4 damage reduction skills, but that is something that you trade for having more true damage and for having more damage reduction. And then we also have Lucia, who can pretty much run a special and not really care about what kind of special she's running, because she's never going to be triggering a damaging special in her combat. So she can just run Aether and run Gambit for to get a lot of damage reduction and also get the true damage out of it. So she's definitely one of the best users of Gambit 4. And like I said, you're going to be missing out on the Phantom Speed of a tier 4 damage reduction skill, but that is the trade-off. And you can easily run this on any kind of Arcane Devourer, Arcane Xiang, or Arcane Downfall unit. Even though you get -1 special cooldown from those weapons, these weapons do have the special charges, and it does make it easy to trigger the higher cooldown specials. So you can easily run this on an armor unit as well, and that is going to be an easy way for them to get the true damage and also get the damage reduction. And Cavaliers can also have access to this as long as their sword, lance, or axe, so they can also get the true damage and damage reduction and then get the counter from the alarm skill. If you're going to be building up Brave Male Robin, then Null Follow-Up Sacred Seal is going to be the best Sacred Seal that you can give to him, because he's missing out on Null Follow-Up, which is going to be pretty important skill to have as a fast unit who wants to melee nuke, because a lot of the threats are going to be having follow-up negation. So if you cannot really outsource Null Follow-Up from Infantry Speed Tactic or Infantry Null Follow-Up, then running it as a Sacred Seal is going to be the option here, and you can pretty much run his base kit. But if you're going to be running him with his legendary counterpart and stacking up the stats, then Attack Speed Unity is going to be a pretty amazing option. And you can actually get a lot of stats with the Rally Spectrum and the Grand Strategy. So it is obviously going to be an option that you can run with him if you're going to be using Legendary Male Robin. And then finally, at max investment and high investment, he can also Omni Tank, because he does get a lot of damage reduction from Gambit 4 and his weapon. So he can try and do that. He's obviously not the best at it, but still he can retaliate back with Ignis and do a lot of damage. So that is also a role that he can do. If you're going to be using him in Aether Raids offense as a support for your Omni Tank or your Vantage unit, then you can just go on the full-on support route and give him a Ruse skill and give him a Rally skill, and that way he can just support your main unit and also provide them the Rally Spectrum. And finally, if you do want to use him at max investment in Arena at Plus and Merge, then you would have to give up on the adaptive damage, because Bonfire Ignis are not high scoring specials. So that is going to be really unfortunate that a part of his weapon simply gets disabled if you want to have max score on him in Arena. And he can score like a 200 BST unit because he's a Gen 8 infantry unit. So that is going to be making him a solid unit to be used in Arena with his Rally Spectrum support. And the fact that he can warp so easily with Tip the Scales is going to be making him a really fun unit. Brave Soren strategizes as a green infantry mage this time, and he has got Archsage Tome that gives him -1 special cooldown, making Flare into a 2 cooldown special. And at start of turn, he grants either any support partner within 2 spaces of him or any kind of ally with the highest defense +6 to all of their stats as the visible buff, and also Assign Decoy status effect, which allows any kind of unit to trigger Savior effect depending on their range. So if they are a melee unit, then they're going to be able to get near save effect, and if they're a ranged unit, then they're able to get the far save effect. So depending on their range, they can get the Savior effect, and keep in mind that this is not going to be working if that unit already has any kind of save skill. So you cannot make a unit both far save and near save. That's not how it's going to be working out. So this allows you to make infantry units like Brave Dimitri, Diamant work as a near save unit, Duo Asker, Summer Ymir as a far save unit, and even cavalry units like Freyr and Legendary Salif as near save units. And we also have a bunch of flyers with Gambit 4 or Guard Bearing 4 function as a near save tank. So this is going to be a really strong aspect of Soren's weapon, because this allows you to have another save unit, and this is going to be extremely good for Aether Raids offense, Aether Raids defense, and especially in Summoner Duels. So in Aether Raids Chaos and in Summoner Duels, you can only bring 1 save unit, and you're able to bypass that restriction by using Brave Soren and his Assign Decoy. And I've had a lot of fun using him in Summoner Duels and also in Aether Raids offense. So Assign Decoy is truly what makes Brave Soren into an amazing unit with his support capabilities. And then for his weapon, if he has got any kind of unit within 3 spaces of him, then he can get extra stats depending on 5 plus the highest bonus on each stat between the allies in 3 spaces of him. So he's pretty much able to copy the bonuses for himself and use that in the combat. And as it is, he does buff up the Savior unit or Assign Decoy unit with +6 to all of his stats. And then he can also get the Dragon Wall damage reduction, which is resistance based. And Soren has got very high resistance at base 47, tying with young Lucius for the highest resistance in the game. So this allows him to function as a bulky mage who can hit really hard with that base 45 attack, and he can truly hit hard with his rare talent, Slot A skill. So this is going to be activated whenever he's at or above 25% HP. He's able to get +7 to all of his stats, and he also disables the adaptive damage of the opponents. So this allows him to pretty much tank with his resistance against the dragon units, which is extremely good as a high resistance mage. And depending on the value of his resistance minus foe's resistance, he's able to get some effects. So if his resistance is 1 or more than the opponent, then he's able to get the null guard effect or the half tempo effect. And this allows him to trigger Flare on his brave hit, because Flare becomes a 2 cooldown special with his weapon, and then Time Pulse 4 brings it down to 1 cooldown. And if he has got 10 or more resistance, and if either foe's range is 2, or if he initiates combat, then he gets the Brave effect. So he can get the Brave effect in the player phase, which is really strong as a nuke with that 45 base attack that also has a super boon. And he can also get the Brave effect in the enemy phase against the ranged units. Now, against a lot of the dragon units that have very high resistance, meeting the resistance check is going to be a bit hard, but still Soren can stack up a lot of resistance, and he also has Time Pulse 4, which goes really well with Flare. And to make it even better for his nuking potential, he gets Flare and Magical Null Follow Up. So Flare is a new special for infantry mages that is a 3 cooldown special, and it is basically a stronger Luna, and if the unit's HP is below 70%, then it allows you to boost the damage by 40% of foe's resistance, and you heal up 30% of the unit's maximum HP. So this allows for some pretty good healing, and Soren is going to be a bulky mage, so he does appreciate this kind of healing, and Magical Null Follow-Up does allow him to get the full Null Follow-Up effect, which might not seem that big of a deal when he's not the fastest unit, but Soren is also not too slow. He's going to be fast enough to trigger his Null Follow-Up against a lot of dragon units or high resistance units that are going to be slow. So against them, he can at least try and prevent their auto follow-up and break through their follow-up negation effects. So this can definitely help him, and of course, this helps him nuke because it allows him to shred through the damage reduction skills by 50%. So even if you're not completely neutralizing the damage reduction skills like you do with Special Spiral, this is still really good because at least you have it, and you also get Null Follow-Up at the same time, which can help you against the slower opponents. Overall, Brave Soren is an incredibly powerful utility unit who can provide the Assign Decoy status, and Assign Decoy does not really work with speed preempt units. It can work with the Vantage units, but it doesn't really work with the preempt units, and you can actually give Assign Decoy to 2 units if they have the same defense. So you can both have far save and near save if you have the unit with the same defense, which can work out with some bulky mages like Duo Asker, so it could be pretty fun, but a lot of times it is, easier said than done, and most of the times you're going to be using only one ally with Assign Decoy status effect. And this is what is going to be making Soren really unique, because I don't really think that he's going to be getting power crept when it comes to Assign Decoy, because that is his exclusive skill as Emblem Soren in Fire Emblem Engage. So I don't really think that some new unit is just going to be having Assign Decoy like that. So it is going to be giving him the staying power in the metagame, and he's going to be an extremely unique unit who provides support but also can nuke and carry his own weight by hitting really hard with his brave hits and then triggering Flare, and also having the damage reduction to be bulky and not really caring about a lot of the dragon save tanks because he disables their adaptive damage. So that gives Soren a higher ceiling, and he definitely is meta influential, at least when it comes to competitive game modes like Aether Raids and Summoner Duels. Of course, you can still use the save units, but still Assign Decoy is extremely useful, especially if you want to support your allies with Assign Decoy or just provide some utility. Of course, in the light season, Embla is able to ignore the save skills and is Assign Decoy with her Severance, but he's going to be a lot more useful in the Astro season and also in Aether Raid's defense, because you can pretty much make a mythic unit like Freyr into a near save unit, which allows him to do like 2 rolls, which is really good. And in Summoner Duels, like I mentioned before, it allows you to have a near save unit. Most of the times you are going to be using a far savior, and having a near savior is going to be helping you push your team further down the enemy line and pretty much push your advantage state. So he's going to be really influential for Summoner Duels despite the drawbacks and the checks and balances that we have for the save units. And units other than the armor units that can have access to other skills which armor units cannot does provide another aspect to the Assign Decoy utility that he brings and how they can function as a safe tank. Oh yeah, Citrine can spread this Assign Decoy status, but I really wouldn't recommend doing that because when everyone is a save unit, no one is, because if 2 near save units or 2 far save units overlap with their range, none of their savior skills are going to be triggering. So even though on paper it might seem pretty good, in practice it doesn't really work. Flair is an inhittable special for only the infantry mages, which is a bit of a bummer, but the best users of this are definitely going to be someone like Ascended Celica, because she can loop her miracle with the healing from Flair and also the healing from Finish Kill, and you can pretty much let go of Soul of Zofia for magical null follow-up so that you can shred through the damage reduction, and with Time Pulse 4 and her tempo effect, she can always retaliate back with Flair and heal up the HP, which is really good. So Ascended Celica is easily the best unit to use Flair on, and also a lot of the bulky mages like Duo Asker, Goto, Legendary Guinevere are all able to use Flair and make the use out of the healing, and any kind of other unit is going to be making use out of Flair because it is going to be a stronger Luna for them, and the healing is pretty much an advantage of it if you're trying to stay healthy and if you're a bulky mage, or if you just want to stay in the threshold of your weapon. So overall it can work out for any kind of other infantry mage, but these infantry mages that can make use out of Flair, especially when they're bulky, is going to be a standout option. Brave Soren can be run with Attack Resistance Ideal 3 as a Sacred Seal, or you could even run Phantom Resistance as a Sacred Seal because he does have that resistance check in his rare talent, so that could be done, but I do like having a bit extra attack. So Attack Res Ideal can be run, and you can just run his base kit as it is already pretty good. And if you want to have some teleportation, then you can just run Attack Speed Oath 4 or Attack Res Oath 4 in his Slotsy and run a lower cooldown special like Glimmer, and with this high attack you can make fantastic use out of the special as well. So this allows you to just have the teleportation and more mobility, which can definitely be pretty helpful. And if you're going to be using him in Aether Raids defense or Summoner Duels, then you can run Canto Control in his Slotsy, and while testing him many times I felt like having Canto Control would have been so good. So Canto Control just allows you to have that extra utility which Soren can provide aside from Assign Decoy, which he already provides. So having this is really useful, and if you have any kind of special cooldown externally like from Duo Asker, then you can still use Flair, but if you want you can also use a lower cooldown special, but I really see a lot of value in Canto Control if you're going to be using him quite a lot in those game modes. You can also use him as a more of a supportive unit for the infantry save support, because you can use Infantry Breath and Infantry Hexblade, and Infantry Breath is available in the Grail pool from Kade and Soren, so you can have both of these infantry skills and pretty much provide the support to the infantry units whenever they're going to be safe tanking, because if they overlap with Soren or if they're adjacent to Soren, then they can make use of both of these skills, which is really good and can help them in many matchups. And then finally, if you're going to be plus in merging him, then I feel like ascending his resistance asset can be really helpful because he does have that resistance check, and overall the best IV for him is plus attack because of the brave attacks, so he could be used in arena as a plus 10 merge unit, and he's going to be scoring like a 190 BST unit because he's Gen 8 infantry mage, which is really good, and he can provide the Assign Decoy and be really strong in arena as well. Choose Your Legend 7 has got amazing units that are all very unique and really fun to play with, and it depends on your playstyle, your barracks, and the game modes that you play on who you want to summon on. In my opinion, Brave Soren and Brave Female Corrin are the strongest of the bunch. If you're a casual player or a new player, or if you just want to have a top tier safe tank in your barracks, then you cannot go wrong with Brave Female Corrin. When you pair her up with good support units like Elamine, Legendary Male Robin and such, then she can become an incredibly strong force to be reckoned with. And on the other hand, I would recommend Brave Soren to more of the veteran players or players who are more competitive, because he requires more team building and stronger allies so that he can get most out of his Assign Decoy. He's also an insane mage nuke, so that also helps with his overall performance. Brave Soren is a bit more complex unit, and if you just want to have a simple unit, then Brave Female Corrin is the unit that you can easily pick up. So hopefully this can help you with the dilemma if you're trying to pick any of these units. And make sure to share this video with your friends. I worked incredibly hard on this comprehensive review, and if you did enjoy, then make sure to leave a like and a comment. Helps me tremendously, and if you really enjoyed, you could always support me directly by using super thanks down below or by becoming a YouTube member. And for more FEH videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because YouTube sub boxes really need a strategist like Soren. So with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.